Hello, everyone. This is Saima Dillon, and you're listening to Heart with Saima, the podcast show for people searching for that courageous person within us who wants to be inspired by listening to stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Saima Dillon. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. Without waiting anymore, let's dive right in. Just a little bit about me. I like to touch lives, one person at a time. I'm a realtor by choice, a humanitarian at heart, and my podcast, Heart to Heart, is my sounding board. I'm a warrior, a nonconformist, an ordinary person hoping to do extraordinary things. Um, Today, I have two guests with me. They join me every Tuesday first Tuesday of every month, and I have missed them tremendously. Um, I have Ashok who runs this empathy clinic. His passion is to understand people, the sorrows, the joys, the relationships at home, workplace. He started this empathy clinic to provide a solid basis of appreciating the inner experience of the people that he is privileged to work with, because empathy helps both diagnose as well as treat his clients. And he has a special interest in couples therapy and post-traumatic stress disorder. I have Nancy here. She's a keynote speaker and the creator and founder of the Chick with the Tool Belt program. And I have something else to tell you about her. She helps businesses and people find their voice and guiding them on how to express it in a way that feels authentic using this Chick with the Tool Belt program. Nancy works with clients on building their understanding of why personal content is their most powerful tool on social media. Through the Chick with the Tool Belt, people discover what is already within them, are guided in finding their voice and understanding how to fully and comfortably use that voice to express and engage. And without waiting anymore, I am going to bring two of my favorite people who I have missed a lot over the past 2 months since I last saw them. Nancy and I tried to do this without you, Ashok, but the stars were not in our favor, and Facebook just put us in Facebook jail, and then my internet went out and whatnot, and we could not do it. So here we are. We had to go without the show for 2 months, and we are back on. And how are you, Ashok? How are you doing? How was your trip?
I'm doing okay. I took a trip for a bunch of reasons, but the main reason was to connect with people who are important to me. And these are my adult children. One married and one is getting married soon. There is a third child, and he's extra special, and he lives here with us. But what I'll say is that when I connect with people, particularly when I travel and connect with people, I know this is when I went to India a couple of years ago, 2020, just when the pandemic was starting up. I always grow a little bit. And it's not because I'm personally growing so much as I'm feeling that my connection to the people that matter to me, that unison, that group event causes me to grow as well. And what I do in my clinic, and I'm sure Nancy will agree with this, is that we're really into helping people grow. And that doesn't mean that you get underneath them and push them up. It means that you help them find their way to push themselves up. So maybe I'll just leave it there.
I think it's encouragement. It's just connections. It's just spending time showing people that you care for them and that you love them enough to want to be with them. And I think words are not enough. Action needs to be accompanied with our words. And Nancy, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm always happy to be here, and I'm always thankful to my tribe for showing up. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. Ashok, you were saying I don't push people. And when I talk about what I do, whether it be, my keynote speaking and radiating real or the Chick with the Tool Belt, I'm a guide. I'm a Sherpa. I'm there to take you on the path And really, to me, it's sort of that, when you drive the same route, but you're not the one driving, and you look around and you get to see the scenery differently, and you notice things you never noticed before. So that's sort of how I approach anyone that I am growing with, in terms of it's already inside of you. We're just going to find it together. We're going to spend time in different places, look a little differently, and see what feels good to you. So for me, that's exactly it. I'm not pushing anyone over cliffs. Not throwing anyone off the high dive. It doesn't work that way. I know there are people that work that way, but people who trust me with their vulnerability, right? I take that very seriously, and I honor that, because it's a privilege and it's a gift.
Absolutely. I mean, so many people are just always trolls who are always fighting on the internet, right? For me, it's like, I don't want to fight with anyone. Okay. I mean, I don't believe in an eye for an eye. If people are fighting, and if, yes, exactly. And if people want to fight, hey, you know what? Good luck to you. I'm just going to change my course and my direction, because, when you step into a puddle and you're fighting in a puddle, you're going to get yourself dirty, not just the other person. Right. So
yeah, everybody gets wet when you're in the puddle together. It's so true. And, one of the things that recently I was saying to someone about, and it's a post coming up, so guys, look for it. It's about, like, how much of what you do you need credit for? Right? So many of us are out there giving, and people see what we're doing, but there are so many of us that give every day in so many different ways that we will never take credit for, quote unquote. It'll either go uncredited, or we'll let somebody else take the credit for it. Let them grow, let them bask, let the light shine on them. And so, yeah, that's what's been on my mind lately, is sort of like, how much of what you do you need credit for? Because to me, the humility is what keeps all of us in this place of being able to help others. The second I think that I am better than you, the second I think I know more about you than you do, right? I'm sort of all of a sudden become this expert on you, then whatever it is I'm offering is tainted.
But people are experts. I will tell you this, that, I've lived in the Dallas area for a very long time, since 1991. So very, very long time. I've been in just Dallas. So I know a lot of people. I'm close friends with, literally, I can count it on one hand, literally, maybe even, a few fingers. But recently, after my divorce, I met someone, and I've known her since, I think, the beginning. I must have met her in 91, 92 when I came, but I didn't know her close enough. And when I spent this time with her, talking to her, and she said, you know what? I had a completely different impression of you. Mm. And the community was talking about your divorce, and everyone was like, she shouldn't have done this. And they were making all these assumptions. Mm-hmm. And they were all wrong assumptions.
Okay. It's the presumptions that made them comfortable.
Yes.
It's the things that didn't threaten their world, didn't tap into any of their insecurities. I had a lot of that too when I went through my divorce. And what I also had was people saying, like, I had the wrong impression of you. Well, maybe you didn't. I wasn't this person then. At least I wasn't necessarily sharing this person then, because of the circumstances under which I was living. And that was, a choice. But even when I left and I moved in here, I have dear friends who are next door, who we sat down one day and we were laughing, because they were like, oh gosh, when you first moved in, nope, we didn't even look in your direction. You were giving up such a strong vibe of like, not interested. Don't. And now the last 2 days I've had, food on my doorstep from them, like saying, I get a text at 5 a.m. There's a salad on your doorstep. There's right. And the relationship is so different because I'm in a different place and I'm a different person. So I think it's a combination of things. People accept and decide the narrative that fits their comfort level. And in my divorce, I know there's one specific person who said to me, well, you said this was going to make you happy. Then why aren't you happy?
Wow.
Yeah, I said, I never said that. I said it was the best right choice for me, but it bothered them that this pretty picture, right? I had taken my hand and swiped through the whole thing. And the only way that could possibly be okay is if I was like, unicorns, rainbows, Skittles, that kind of thing. And that it wasn't that. It just wasn't. And so people protect their comfort over, and this is a shock you, over stepping into empathy and being able to just be there, right? And it not be threatening to them, not change anything about their core values, how they're living, just be. And so it doesn't surprise me that their presumptions were quote unquote wrong, or that, and especially as women, I think we tend to enter into these unspoken adversarial relationships, these competitions with one another, and we create these narratives, and it makes me so sad because there's so much abundance. And if women supported women, right, like just fix her crown, and don't say anything, right?
Someone said
Let me
something.
just make a comment here, because I want to. There's a lot unpacking right now, and I want to go back to Nancy's point about getting credit for something, and I want to also make a couple of points about that. So I'm a therapist. I'm a psychiatrist, right? That's what I do. I don't get any credit for anything I do because it's private. I can't go out and say, my clients did this and this happened for them, because it's an extraordinarily private thing. So I think that's a really cool spot to be, where I can participate in people's growth, and I'm totally behind the scenes. Unlike the producer, director, actor, lighting guy, and who gets no credits when the movie comes up. That's a perfect place for me. But let me flip this into what you're actually getting into a conversation about. There's credit, and then there's blame. And when people get divorced, divorce is such an institution of most civilized cultures. When people get divorced, it's very easy to kind of look for that person to blame. And history, and I'm sad to say this, but it's so true, usually blames the women as to why did you try enough? Did you work hard enough? Did you bend over backwards? And I have some very old copies of the Kama Sutra in my basement, and I read them, and they're horrific. In the sense that it explicitly advises women to bend over backwards to accommodate her husband's affairs, his concubines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So clearly it's an old, antiquated piece of history. But I think the issue of blame and finding the convenience of blame is the opposite of credit. And both of you, are really describing in your own inimitable ways what it feels like to have blame thrown on you that has no place, really. It's a judgment. It's blame, as Nancy was alluding to, for convenience. So that once someone says, that's not me, that's you, then they can absolve their soul of any kind of social blame in this cultural norm that we have called marriage. That actually North Americans are pretty bad at marriage. We're not good at it. So I just want to say those few things. Thank you.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. People don't realize that they judge and they judge and they judge all the time. But I will say one thing, Nancy, and that is, I think when I made that decision and when I should say when the divorce decision was made, I shouldn't even say when I made it. When the divorce decision was made, and I shared it with my close friends, they were just filled with fear. What exactly that fear was? It was a fear that what if I have regrets after it's over? What if I don't find someone who is? What if I find someone who is worse? Okay, I shouldn't even say that's coming out wrong, no matter which way I say
You
it.
can be unfiltered. No one here is judging you. And these
Well,
were the thoughts you had. You weren't looking for the politically correct words. You were worried that you were going to end up in a situation that was worse,
see,
or the
because
person was worse.
I mean, this is also what my closest friends were fearing. So they were consumed with fear on my behalf.
Mhm.
I was not really. I'm an optimist. I don't overthink. I just follow my heart. So I'm not an overthinker. So, but they were filled with fear, that, oh gosh, what will happen? How will she support herself? How will she support her household? What if things get worse? They were just consumed with all this, and I was having a hard time being with them, because their fear would fill me with this toxic negative energy, and I would feel this huge burden on me. Whereas if I stayed away from anyone, which we were because of COVID, spending a lot of time in quarantine, I could hear myself. I could listen to my intuition. I followed my gut feelings.
Simon, I just want to make the point here that when somebody gets cancer, it's very common for people to distance themselves, have trouble being close to that person. And to a certain degree, when someone has a misfortune or trauma or a divorce, exactly the same thing happens. Some people are just not comfortable with it and they distance themselves. And the other thing, the final thing I'll say, is that, and both of you are very strong people. And that can be a pain in the ass to be told that as well, because being strong is often not that much fun. But if someone like you can have this situation happen, then suddenly you think, well, that could happen to me. And if this icon of strength, is going to collapse, then that makes everyone frightened. And this is one of the reasons why people get scared for themselves, because they're seeing such a powerful person topple, and it makes them uncomfortable.
And I think what I have been sharing on social media is literally not the fear-based aspect of things, of the relationship, but it's been the building and the strength and the courageous aspects, because none of it is easy.
Yeah, it's a huge change. I mean, and I was married for 16 years with the person for 18 years. So there was no part of my life that hadn't been touched, right, by him, our relationship. And so when we were dissolving our marriage, it was a complete relearning of life. Like, how do you start over? And I had to create new rituals and find new friends and find a way to go back over things, not in a back way, but they came up again as I was moving forward, that would normally include him, that didn't, and figure out, well, how do you want this to be now? Because it's your choice. I put in the comments that, I waited for a long time in my marriage. I needed to be 100% sure. I needed to know I tried everything. I didn't want to have any regrets. But I remember thinking, like, if I just had a good, tangible reason, right? If I could say, and I'm glad I couldn't for my ex-husband's sake, that he started drinking again, or he started using again, or he was beating me or abusing me, right? If there was something I could give people so that they would go, oh, okay, now I have empathy for you, right? Because something clearly happened and you're not, quote unquote, to blame. I initiated my divorce, therefore I was to blame. Right. That was everybody assumed I was the bad guy who was breaking up the band. And that's where it went. And I did see Aya ask about, are we taught to judge, or is that inherent? And I think that as humans, we like comfort, we like known. Our brains are comfortable there in Ashok. You can tell me if I'm wrong. And so often we also like when things complete. So we write the narrative, we fill in the blanks, we fill in the gaps, and tend to fill it in ways that work for us in our internal narrative and what makes us comfortable. So I don't know if that's judging or just sort of a function of how humans work.
Well, I'm gonna say a few things about that. I think human beings are creatures who seek comfort, but we also seek other things. We seek challenge. We seek pleasure. And ironically, sometimes we seek pain while we're actually pursuing pleasure or challenge, because sometimes to achieve something, we have to get through a struggle to be able to achieve that thing. I think what happens in marriage sometimes, especially for the way North Americans have marriage, and essentially the nuclear marriage, I call it, is that there's tremendous pressures on a singular relationship to provide so much. And Nancy, when you were saying, and I know Saima, you'll chime in with this, is that when you're extricating yourself from a marriage, it's not just two trees in the forest who are deciding not to be together. The entire forest has to kind of shuffle around to accommodate all those roots that have been attaching and connecting for decades, right?
That's
And
such a
so,
brilliant analogy, Ashok.
thank you.
I love that analogy. It just puts perspective on so much.
Do you want to say more?
No, I just interrupted you because I love that analogy.
But I think we can all relate. Let me tell you a little tiny story. When my first child was in grade 2, he came home and he said, "Mommy and Daddy, when are you going to get your divorce?" And we said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, everyone in my class is getting divorces." It was like being handed out like Christmas cards, and his perspective was that this is such a common thing. And I think I think this is probably a difficult conversation in the sense of what is normal. We're at the point now where divorce is normal in our culture. And I think we need to get away from the idea of that. And I always say that the divorce rate is not an indication of happiness in marriage. Because a lot of people who are, quotes, happily married are actually not.
Yeah.
They're just in the habit of staying together in either for kids or for their friends or their parents, or they own a business together, 1,000 reasons. A truly happy marriage is a marriage that you want to be in every day. And my poor wife gets asked this question every day. Do you love me? Do you want to still be married to me? And after 35 years, getting on for 36 now, it's an amazing thing to have that. But I stress about that every day, because the day she says, "I don't know, I'm not so sure if today's I want to be," that's the beginning of that hole in the boat, and we start sinking together, or maybe she'll jump overboard.
I not directly to what you're saying, but I was seeing in the comments where Maria, I'm trying to find it. Yeah, she said, yes, you're a bad person because you didn't stay until death do you part. And that is such an interesting one for Maria. And I've had many conversations with people about this. The expectation that I keep a promise that my 25-year-old self made, even if it doesn't honor the woman I am today. So in my 40s, when I got divorced, I was expected to keep the promise that 25-year-old woman made for the rest of my life. Now, people redo their wardrobes, they move cities, states, change cars, but the one thing we're not supposed to ever outgrow, and if you do, that you failed, is your marriage. This promise my 25-year-old self made that I could continue to keep, but at what expense? It didn't fit my 40-something-year-old self. It didn't honor the woman I had become. But the standard is you stay. Right? That's for most cultures, most groups, that's a lot of the messaging. And certainly growing up happily ever after, man. I mean, you can't get enough of happily ever after. And, happily ever after was always presumed to be, right? The two people were together forever, instead of happily ever after being like, okay, well, things changed and now my happily ever after looks completely different.
I think there's a really important concept to mention right now, because Nancy, I think you're tapping into something that's actually key to the way I think about relationships. I even wrote a book about this some years ago. I don't think people can conceive of their future self much more than maybe a year or two. If I think of myself in 10 years from now, I can have all kind of fantastic fantasies, but guess what's going to happen between now and then? Life.
A whole lot.
Life is going to happen, and it's going to shove my course off. If you imagine a flashlight aimed to the sky, it's a straight line, but life is going to move that beam of light in so many different directions. Now, if you imagine two flashlights parallel, starting off with two I do's and let's get going with this thing called marriage, what are the chances that 10, 15, or 20 years later, those two beams are still parallel? Like zero, really, zero. And so there has to be a very deliberate effort to try and coincide with each other. And quite frankly, that's probably impossible. And so I think to be able to forward imagine, I call it future empathy, to empathize with your future self and then to empathize with your partner's future self is probably impossible. And I think what's happened to a certain degree is that people happily got into marriages much younger than our generations do, like 18 or 19 or 20, when you were completely blind about life and you had no choice otherwise than just to stay in it. So that I'll leave it there.
So it's so funny because I said I didn't want to get married till I was at least 30, and I went ahead and got married at 26. And I was so smart with my first objective of wait, because I mean, so much changed for me. And even where I was in terms of, I met my ex-husband, I was in graduate school. We were playing life. We were like playing this game because I didn't have to go to work every day. I was a graduate student and we could go surf every morning, and he was in the film industry. So he was around and available for those things. And that felt great during that time. And then, life shifted and we got jostled. And again, if we go with the two flashlights as parallel beams, keeping those both straight would have meant that neither of us changed. It's an unrealistic expectation, and it's a dangerous expectation. It is truly like it's a dangerous, scary expectation that no one changes, and even if you do, it doesn't matter. Right?
You're still expected to conform.
You're still expected to stay and see it through. I mean, some of the things that people say to you, like that did you not try hard enough, or what didn't you like? I don't know what you're like. I took marriage very seriously. I struggled for a long time on how could I make this relationship better? Could I make this relationship better? Looking at myself, like where was I contributing to our lack of connection or our missing one another? It wasn't blaming my ex-husband. In fact, I say all the time, he's 8 years older than I am. If anyone changed, it was me. I changed the contract. I was the one who had the radical shift, the radical growth in those 16 years of marriage, 18 years of being together. And so again, I think there's so many people out there that unless someone has an affair or does something so egregious, that they'll stay. Because
Nancy, have seen so many people just suffering in their marriages. They go through the spouses having affairs and they're aware of it and the trauma, and they take it on themselves, and it manifests itself in different forms, whether it's emotional, it's physical, it's mental, but they just keep going through it because that's what the culture has ingrained in them, and they keep living through it. And then the second thing is, I don't know about, I think this generation X and Y is going to be different, but my generation, for me, I was clueless. When I met my husband, I was clueless as to what expectations I should have, or who if I should be looking out for certain key characteristics so that we would blend together. I was just clueless. I had no idea. Yes, the marriage was expected, and it's expected in our culture, and but I was just clueless. Just
Saima, sometimes you're driving your car and that little sign comes on called engine light.
Yeah.
Engine light only means that your car is not running optimally. Now, I'm not an auto mechanic, but that's what it means.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if when people got married, they had a little light that if there was trouble in their marriage, it would start glowing, engine light. Mm-hmm. You guys need to get either some help, probably some couple counseling, speak to some friends, speak to your minister, whatever format, to begin to work on fixing your marriage. The way I look at it is marriage needs to be in a perpetual state of maintenance. And that doesn't mean that everyone should stay married. Absolutely not. Because of those things that inevitably happen. If you're not in a perpetual state of maintenance of your marriage, then inevitably things are going to happen. unhappiness is going to happen, resentments are going to happen, and suddenly your best friend becomes someone you just don't want to spend any more time with. And the other issue I want to talk about with marriage, just briefly touch on this, is the difference between love and liking somebody. A lot of people marry for love, and love is a fickle, delusional emotion. It's beautiful to be in love and to love, but the most enduring relationships that we have typically in our lives are our friendships, which are chosen relationships that we will do anything to maintain that our caring and hopefully reciprocal empathy for that person. So when I'm counseling people about getting married or staying married, I often ask, would you be best friends or at least good friends with this person? And if they say, no way, I say, well, your marriage is probably not going to work. That's what you have to work on. You have to work on the commitment to be a friend to this person. And I'll leave it there, but I just want to make those points.
No, I'm so happy you said that, because I was jotting down notes, and as Saima was speaking, I'm thinking, like, in what other relationship would you accept that and continue to put as much into that relationship, right? With a friend, if you felt disconnected from them, if they weren't equally giving or empathizing or showing up for you, or whatever the myriad of things that build a good, strong relationship, were not there, there's no other relationship in which we would tolerate that much, not only tolerate it, but continue to put energy into, like gripping our nails in till they're like falling. It could be excruciating.
Yes.
And people will still stay. Where else would you accept not being loved the way you deserve to be loved? Not that I saw that Maria put respect and resentment is another one, right? Respect and resentment. I mean, that's hard. How do you want to partner with someone that you resent and you don't respect? And I think that's, for me, I realized that for me, one of the things was like, yes, love is important, but do I respect you? Like, do I really respect you and like you? And like, in a conversation, do I value what you have to say? Do I appreciate the way we disagree and in the ways that we are different? There's all these different questions that I started to ask myself, because again, in what relationship would you accept getting nothing, right, from the other person? And if you're lucky, it's nothing, and it's not pain, and it's not killing your soul, and it's not dimming your light, and it's not all those other things. It's a very interesting construct to me.
I think also something else needs to be said about this, and that is that what actually measures the strength of a structure. And we could just use the bridge example. A bridge may look beautiful. It may connect to islands, to the mainland, etc. But what really determines the quality of that bridge is what it can withstand. And with couples, their relationship will be tested by experiences. And if they can't withstand something, if their relationship can't withstand it, and even if the bridge crumbles a little tiny bit, they have to be able to fix it quickly. So I always think when I'm working with couples, yes, I'll ask them, when was the last time you had tons of fun? And they'll giggle and talk about something. But the more important question is, how did you resolve your last conflict? Because if they can't resolve conflict, if their rug is so high it's touching the ceiling because they've always put everything underneath it, they're not going to have success in dealing with either chronic small conflict, like microaggression conflict, or large traumas that happen in the relationship that eventually cause it to break.
So, what are the key things, Ashok, which absolutely should be there in a relationship in order for people to be able to lay a strong foundation on which to build that relationship?
Well, I'd like all of us to help answer that question, but what I'm going to say is what I'm kind of already said. It's the same thing you'd have with a friend that you're going to have for your whole life, and that is that kind of love, that kind of commitment, that kind of trust, that kind of safety and security. Someone that when you finally get to be with them, your shoulders go down instead of up. Someone that if you were sleeping, you'd feel safe if they were awake. Someone who never puts you in a situation that's toxic, someone who never manipulates you, and even if they do, they're aware of it. Someone you can empathize with, and somebody who has empathy with you. I call this reciprocal empathy. I can go on, but I'd like to hear what you guys say.
What about if you completely disagree on certain things, like whether they could something very strong, like a political part affiliation, or abortion, whether you're pro or not, whatever the opposite is. But how do you handle such difficult subjects? Are
Well,
you supposed to
I don't
flush
have to
them
handle
out?
it. What I'm saying is, if I was suggesting a couple who are planning to get married, I probably could give them 100 questions. And if they don't get, 80, at least 81% of them, in alignment with each other, their marriage is probably not going to work very well. I mean, just look at online profiles that people are putting these days. Non-smoker, and they're actually giving more and more detail because they don't want to waste their time with someone who has core values that don't align. And I think that a small detail can ruin an entire relationship. A big detail may not. You can have people from completely different religious backgrounds who can end up having a successful marriage. And there may be compromise on one or both of them to be able to do that. And I've certainly seen that happen. But I think it's the capacity to resolve those differences that really determines it, rather than what are the differences.
So you're saying you shouldn't just put them under the rug and just not discuss them? Just say, okay, you know what? If you are a Democrat, stay a Democrat.
Let me be crystal clear. I'm have a Brahmin background, and my wife has a Punjabi background.
Uh-huh.
A couple of hundred years ago, we would have been killing each other.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and
Nancy, I'd like to hear about your thoughts about what a relationship needs to have, because you've got so many great ideas about that.
Thank you. One of the things I was putting in the chat was you use the word like, what can you withstand? And for me, being a person who's been through trauma, that for me personally is not a great judge, because my relationships, because of who I am and how much I can withstand, right, can last, but it doesn't mean they're healthy or strong. So for me, I think, I love the idea of like, would you choose this person as your friend? And for me, like, respect, I said, but again, that when you're in that conversation, am I really listening to what you have to say? Because I value who you are as you are, and I'm not trying to change you. That to me is huge. When I can say to someone like, nope, I love all of you, every bit. And I love that you allow me to love the way I want to love. And I love that you love me the way I feel loved, is huge. And I do think it's a lot of these things, and definitely not sweeping under the carpet, but do you feel comfortable expressing yourself truthfully with your partner? Or do you avoid the hard conversations because either you know what they're going to say, or presume you know what they're going to say, or you don't want the conflict because of however you guys work through or don't work through conflict? Is it enough to just hold your voice and tolerate? For me, that's a big one. Loving the way I fight with someone.
How do you work through such a major conflict like, abortion, for example?
I haven't had to do that. So I would be a total hypocrite if I said I knew.
Sure.
There are places for me that certain values will probably need to align, but again, I haven't been there yet, so I don't know.
Saima, it's potentially a contentious and even a religious conversation to have this on this platform. I think abortion in general needs to be taken on a case-by-case example. I've certainly worked with a lot of people, and I'm going to say women, who have had an abortion in their life. Many times, if I'm working with a woman in her, let's say, in her 5th decade of life, we're just collecting a history, and I'll say, have you ever had a pregnancy or an unwanted pregnancy? And they'll start crying because they've never told anyone ever that they'd had lost a pregnancy, or they'd chosen to lose, or the circumstances that they made that decision when they were much younger. And we go back to my flashlights. You can't possibly know how you're going to feel like 30 years later if you had like something like an abortion 20 years before. And when you add another person, like in a couple relationship, and you have different issues on abortion, and couples will come and they're pregnant, and maybe they choose or not choose, or there's a difference, or one wants the pregnancy to go forward and the other one doesn't. I think what they need to do is they need to sort out, and I'm going back to future empathy, is how do you think you're going to feel about this in your future? And really, there are no, I'll say this very gently, there are no right answers in this kind of a story. Because sometimes when someone makes that decision, one way or the other, they have to commit to living with it then.
Yeah, that's what I feel. And I mean, I'm just saying, how do you, such difficult subjects, right? And especially in the past few years, the political scene that has been where people have just been at each other's throat because of their political affiliations or beliefs, or forget political, or vaccination, which has become a political issue, right? So these things, how do you, it's like, no, it's like nobody is wanting to discuss these difficult subjects. So should they just be swept under the rug?
Never, 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 never. I mean, in my book, I'm going to answer never, never, never. And to be equally vulnerable as the two of you, because I think that's fair, and both for our audience and for one another. You know, my take on abortion is, again, it's a very personal decision, and one that I would not want anyone to make for me based on their values, their situation, their emotional needs, or what they can later live with. So I'm unwilling to make that decision for anyone else. I respect that each person, right? And I don't have a problem if you are pro-life. Like this, there's absolutely no judgment, but it's your choice. And I don't want to make that choice for anyone, because I'm not the one that has to live with it.
See, for me, Nancy, I refuse to judge anyone. It's not that I don't, but this is my mindset, that no matter how hard the decisions are, it's not my place to judge anyone. I don't believe in an eye for an eye. I refuse to judge other people based on their decisions, simply because we are in this world accountable for our own choices and our own deeds. I know, based on my religion, I have grown up with this ingrained, that we have not been given the right to judge anyone. This is something that's ingrained in me. So I feel it's not my place to judge. We have to live with our own choices, and sometimes we make the right choices, sometimes the choices are wrong. But I think that's how we are as human beings. We are imperfect, and we are meant to you know just try to make the best decision at any given point in time. And sometimes those decisions are going to be the right beneficial decisions, and sometimes they are not, and we'll have to live with them for the rest of our life. But I think that's okay, because that's how we are meant to be. We are imperfect, and I think that's okay.
I think we're also talking about the capacity to predict. And the idea that we're going to be able to predict the outcome of something, or the emotional outcome of something, is very challenging. So let me tell you a tiny story. My mom got pregnant, and she had a child, and they were in the hospital, and then she said, I think there's another one in there. And they said, no, there's no one in there. And then I came out. So I'm a twin, and I'm the unaccounted for second twin in a pregnancy in basically 1959, 1960, where women weren't diagnosed with twins. And so the second time my mom went to the hospital with my younger brother and sister, who were also twins, they actually believed her that time. So I was completely unaccounted for as far as being expected, or planned, or anything. I'm a total surprise. And I think that's an interesting idea, because I think the way I look at life is a continuous surprise. We can also say it's a continuous disappointment. But I think to be perhaps hopelessly optimistic about this, I don't think all relationships are fixable. Absolutely not. But I think some are. And I think what ultimately has to be fixed, and I hope Nancy will chime in on this, is your relationship with yourself. Because no matter how married or how close you are or how empathic you are, Life is essentially psychologically an alone experience. And we share it as much as we can with people. But if your relationship with yourself has issues or problems or disappointments or definitely trauma, it really, really helps to try and work that out, if possible, where possible.
Absolutely. I mean, we are all fighting our own battles on a daily basis, making decisions, some good, some bad, although we want to make the right decisions, but, some decisions don't work out. And I think that's okay. So, from my perspective, it's like, who has the time to sit there and judge other people and have these such strong opinions, you know, about what choices others have to go and make in whatever circumstances. So I just feel that why shouldn't we just focus on ourselves and just focus on improving our own quality of life and doing self reflection and fixing our, fixing ourselves instead of worrying about other people.
Yeah, I believe, like, again, nothing good comes out of judgment. Curiosity, we can learn about one another, we can get perspective, great. But that judgment piece, we're hurting one another. And I'm huge on the radiating real piece, so that we are not living life as alone as we may feel like we are or think we are. So ultimately, we have to live with our own choices. And, we make the best choices we can at the time with the information we have, with the experiences we've gathered. And, we do our best. That's all you can do. None of us has the crystal ball. But if we are showing up as real and honest and talking about our experiences, and divorce has been one of them. Just tonight, Maria sharing in the comments, right? In my own experience, I thought I was failing at divorce. I had this internal report card, and divorce is not something you fail at. It's just something you get through, right? You just get through it. You get through it, you get done, you get to living, and whatever that means for each individual person. But I thought I was failing because the people around me went through divorce so gracefully, right? The way what I was able to see on the outside was graceful, and they remained happy, and they remained, like whatever it was not happening with me. Right? That I knew for sure that wasn't happening with me, and I thought I was failing. And until I said that to someone and they revealed what was really happening for them in the experience, I didn't know. And so while we each have to live with our own individual choices, absolutely true, we can make those choices from a place of feeling less alone, less like a freak, less like nobody will understand, less influenced by what we should do, because that's what the people around us are going to accept, and more in terms of what's right for me, knowing that there's unconditional love and acceptance out there for me from people who have been down this road before me, and that I am going to be able to pass my wisdom on to someone who has not yet stepped in the place that I am at now. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
I agree with you. I think the value, and Saima, I think the value of these kinds of conversations that people can listen to, is that it's so helpful for people to have some kind of experience that somebody else has had that they can relate to. Because universality, which is the sense of being able to relate to each other, it's kind of like why people all sway at a concert, because music has that profound capacity to bring people who don't even speak the same language together, and why people cry at weddings and funerals, etc. People are craving to feel an emotional connection to each other, whether it's in their most closest relationships or with a group of people that they may have yet to know. And sometimes when I go to a rock concert, or more importantly, if I'm playing in a band and I'm seeing the audience is swaying with what we're doing, suddenly we're connecting in a way that is so incredible and empowering and motivating and almost electrifying. I think we have to tolerate that aloneness, but at the same time, we can connect. And this is why I think especially what Nancy's doing is so powerful.
Thank you. I'm using my skill that I learned from Dan Hall when I want to jump in, and I know that I've got to wait. Just remind myself here, because one of the things that I didn't say earlier that I had been thinking was, again, would you choose this person as your friend? Would you tolerate this relationship that you'll tolerate in your marriage and another friend? Is how important connection is. And we know that for gosh, we know what happens when we don't have authentic connection, physical, mental, emotional. And to think that people are living their lives day after day, like married to a person they have no connection with, and how destructive that can be, and how lonely. Like there's nothing worse to me than being alone when you're with someone, like feeling lonely when I'm with someone, because I don't have that connection. I don't have that feeling of, again, that shared connection experience where we're all that universality. And so I think, again, I'm going back to, I keep thinking in terms of my marriage as these light bulbs go off, what happens when there's no connection? What happens to each individual when there's no connection? What happens to the relationship when there's no connection? And how do we seek to correct that, right? And are you willing to acknowledge that that's something that you need? And if it's not there, are you willing to have the conversation about it? And are you willing to then, show up honestly and roll up your sleeves and, go, okay, I may not like what you have to say here. You may not like what I have to say here, but we need to say it and we need to talk about it.
And going back to Simon's point, I think sometimes people don't have a lot in common, but through empathy, they can sense what their partner would like. So sometimes if I'm out in a shop or something, I might look at something and say, my friend would really like that, or my partner would really like that, or gee, I would like that, but I hope someone else knows that I would like that. And this is the practice of imagining the experience of somebody else from their point of view, not yours, is how you can actually begin to increase your connection to that person. But that does require trust and also vulnerability. So when someone says, what would you like me to do for your birthday or Christmas or et cetera, whatever, isn't it amazing with that, certainly in a couple or in a friendship, where you just know? And I'm sure we've had friends when they give us something and how did you know? How did you know? And my twin and I, we decided to stop doing this. For 3 Christmases in a row, we bought each other the same gift. Wow. We hadn't said anything. We did, that's exactly, I bought the, oh, what? And it's just that thing that can happen sometimes with twins. We're not identical, by the way. So it's just that kind of experiential thing. But I think that's what we're looking for in our closest relationship, that sense of intimate fluidity with the sense of understanding each other.
Yeah, being understood and understanding one another.
I think, Ashok, like you said, it just requires, I think it requires that desire to want to be fluid with each other, to go the extra mile, to be willing to listen to each other's perspective.
I think listening to each other's perspective every single day and asking for that perspective and trying to appreciate it, even if it's not your perspective, even if it's not a perspective that you can. I did a post the other day about a fruit that's a very strange fruit that only you find in Thailand. And I said, how could you explain what this would taste like to someone that's never tasted it? And that's really what being a human being is like. How do you explain to somebody else what your taste is when they have no real sense of what something tastes like to you? But that's how they will favor you. And there's a great therapist actually in Montreal who studies erotic empathy. She's talking about just something like our sexuality and how to explain that to our partners in marriages. A lot of marriages break up because of sexual reasons. And that too can be, how can you empathize with someone? Especially if you're in a pseudo comfortable relationship, you've actually never really sat down and shared with each other what your deepest fantasies are, what your thoughts are, what would really excite and understand my partner essentially from a sexual point of view. So I think I could talk about empathy all day, obviously, but I think that's the beginning of really getting to know yourself, but also your partner.
Well, I think these conversations are important to have. So as couples, or when you meet other people, I mean, okay, so whenever I get ready to meet other people, what should I be looking up? Maybe that's the topic for
Next time,
next,
right? Can you
next
be you? Can you be fully you with that person? What to look out for? Yeah. So next time, let's see. Being able to be honest with your own perspectives is key. Alex, thank you. You can't tell others if you can't. Yeah, if you don't know for yourself, you can't expect others to know. And how do we, again, how you can explain the taste of a fruit to someone who didn't taste it? That was appreciated. That's a great example. I'm just quickly looking. We find happiness in one way or another. You don't have, it will look for you. You do not have to look for it. There's just, thank you. I want to quickly, sorry, I'm a little off track here, but I was looking through the comments and thank everyone, because the discussion that was happening in the comments was really valuable and
Fabulous, yeah.
Insightful. And honestly, for me, lets me know that these are the things I need to be talking about, because these are the conversations that need to be had, because there are people like you guys out there that are willing to engage in it. And that even if just one person, it shifts something for them or makes them feel less alone or just impacts them in some sort of positive way, then it was worth having the conversation. So much love and appreciation to you guys. And to you, Saima, and you, Ashok, for the conversations that we do have.
Always. Ashok, any final words before we end the show?
Yeah, just one of my questions that I ask, certainly of my clients in therapy, but also of my friends. I ask them, what am I like to be in a relationship with? And it's a bit of a testy question, because you don't always get what you would like to hear. Like, oh, you're amazing, you're lovely, you're sensitive. Sometimes you hear things. And I think it's a great question to ask. Like, what am I like to be in a relationship with? And when people meet each other for the first time and they're starting to build a relationship, it's a helpful question to ask, how are we doing? How are you experiencing me? How could I help you to experience me, or me experience you more? And if there's an interest in doing that, that relationship is going to have a better chance of making it.
I'm smiling because I know I've asked, and I know, and I'm okay with it. But and I'll leave you with this. When I was single the first time around, my brother worked at a big law firm here in LA, and my sister-in-law was determined that he was going to find me, my husband. And he asked, he's like, fine, well, what are you looking for? And somehow at 24 years old, I knew. I said, well, I need someone who's always going to start with, I love you. But they are going to say, I love you, but you're being up right now. Because I know I have the capacity to, get there, to be a BITCH, if that's, how I would describe it, where I can be completely unreasonable and nasty and all those things that are human. But I need someone in my life who is strong and confident and comfortable enough in our relationship to say, hey, I love you, but I'm going to call you out right now. Right? I'm going to give you the check. Do with it what you need to do. And I say there's very few people in my life who have the privilege, right? Because you have to have a certain relationship to be able to do that. But there are people in my life that can do that. And it actually just right away I go, okay, maybe I need to walk away. Maybe I need to hang up. Maybe I need to breathe. Maybe I need to laugh. Maybe I need to stew in the corner for a while. But I know that I need someone who's going to honestly check me and keep me my best self. Like, not keep me, because you can't keep me anything, but
just give you the tools,
yes,
give you the push, the support system that you need, right? To just lift you and bounce you back, instead of running away from there, right?
Yes. The hip check back into, on my path. Like, you're a little bit off. Let me just bump you over here.
And so, of course, we when we all meet, we always have a wonderful time, and there's just this conversation, that in-depth conversation, and discussing such valuable things and tips, and but we have to end the show. So even though we don't want to, because we maybe we should go for another hour since we didn't have two shows, but
We have 2 months worth of stuff.
but we do have to end. So with that, any final words, Nancy?
Just thank you to everyone. I'm so appreciative of everything and everyone that shows up.
Ashok?
Both of you guys make me grow. Every time I speak to you, I feel I know a little bit more, and I feel a little safer inside my heart. And you're both fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And likewise, I missed you guys so much. I mean, my Tuesdays were, I didn't have any show. I didn't have any guests. So with that, having said that, thank you all so much. From the bottom of my heart, I'm so grateful to everyone who spent this hour with us and who was constantly commenting. And thank you, Brian, Tim, and all the people who were there with us, just supporting us throughout. I am so grateful, filled with gratitude for your support, because it takes a village to bring something to life and to expand it. So thank you for taking the time out. The show is Heart to Heart with Saima, and we have it Tuesdays, every Tuesday. And of course, if you feel that the show can help someone, please do take 30 seconds to simply share this on social media. You can join my email list by emailing vip@saimadillon.com. I will be so grateful. Thank you so much for being here. And we are going to end this. Here we go.
Bye.